Hey, so finally got around to making some updates to the Jeep that we've been talking about for some time. I want to talk to you guys about that. The reason I haven't put out a video the last couple of weeks is because, well, we've just been busy, or I've been busy working on the Jeep. And then, of course, I got my day job, and we've been trying to plan some upcoming travel events and adventures too, and that just takes time. But today, I want to give you guys an update on the things that I've addressed and walk you through what I've done and talk a little bit about these things. Now, I did a video over a year ago about all of the modifications I did to the Jeep originally for camping and overlanding with the two dogs. And I get a lot of questions on that video. I mean, it blows me away that video is still one of our most popular videos. And I'll put a link to it here somewhere, but just a heads up, some of that stuff is a little outdated in that some of those modifications have stood the test of time and some haven't. In fact, some of the changes that I'm going to walk you through today are to address some of the things that didn't work out for us with those modifications and what I've done recently. Now, I'm going to do a whole new walk around of the Jeep and cover everything in excruciating detail, and that'll be a much longer video. But today, I just wanted to talk about the things I've been doing over the last couple of weeks, specifically some of the Fender work that I've done to address some issues, and the fact that allowed me to actually do some wiring upgrades as well, and walk you through those things. I made some notes so that I can make sure I don't forget anything to talk to you guys about today as I give you an update. So, as mentioned before, we went ahead and swapped out the inner fender liners from stock, and you may remember there was a plastic inner fender liner that came down through here and kind of stuck out a little bit away from the pinch seam, and what would happen is there was a flap that would stick out down here, and the tire would catch that periodically and make a bit of noise. It was kind of a rubbing noise, or like something loud enough that the dogs would hear it in the Jeep and they'd kind of freak out a little bit. So we removed those inner fender liners completely to give ourselves some space. And just so you guys know, when you do that inner fender liner work, the amount of work you have to do to get that set up to put in the inner fender liners versus installing the actual fenders themselves, there's some work that's the same. So if you're already installing the inner fenders and you're thinking about either doing the chop, it's about the same amount of work. Here's the thing I want to say right up front. Is the difference between the clearance on the metal cloak tube fenders and if you were to do a chop fender. So you keep basically the outside painted part of your fender and get rid of the inner fender liners and go to a different light. And the type of lights that they make, for instance, I'll give you an example. You can see here, this was a set of Quake lights that I had purchased some time ago because I thought I was going to do the chop fenders. You can actually do that. And what it does is it replaces this portion in the front to give that plastic fender support. But let's talk about that a little bit, because this is one of the reasons I didn't do that. There was a few reasons why we did what we did here. And you can see I went with the tube fenders. I'll put up a little clip of it here, but some time ago, we ran over a tree branch, basically, that was just a tree branch that was laying in the dirt, and it popped up and jammed up into the plastic fender right here, and it literally broke that whole piece of plastic fender off. Yeah, we had a little problem today. Had a big tree branch get up in there and yeah, and pulled it out away from the Jeep, the side of the Jeep. And that's even with the support structure and the inner fender liner and everything that's there. Now, when you do the fender chop, you remove that whole inside area, and so what you're left with is just that shell that goes on here. And to me, that was going to be a little too flimsy for the kind of things we do. Now, if you're just crawling, if you're just rock crawling, truth be told, you're going to get the best articulation and tire clearance with an inner fender chop. It would even be better than the tube fenders that you see here. I think it's just an inch or two of articulation. But I don't just do rock crawling. As you guys know, we do a bunch of overlanding, and we drive through some areas with heavy brush. that's scraping down the side of the Jeep. You can see, I don't know if you can see it now, but there are scrapes all over our paint and pinstripes. And we're hitting tree branches and things like that with the fenders all the time. And for that reason, I am going with the tube fenders. Now, I hear some people say that, oh, but you know, if you hit something with the tube fender, it's gonna, you know, dent in your aluminum, you know, fenders and the body parts. And that's true. That could happen. You know, if you hit something hard with this, it could dent into the tub. You know, this is pretty, I don't know if you can see that moving at all, but this isn't real thick metal that the Jeeps are made of, and it's aluminum. And that could definitely happen, but I'm not bouncing this thing off of rocks like that on the sides. You know, I mean, we would never do that intentionally, and I think that's more rare for us than driving through heavy brush. Are they as good looking as the, you know, the painted fenders? To me, they're not. And my wife, Noelle, she's like, look, is this a mall crawler, or are we using this to actually do overlanding? And of course we're using it for overlanding. So was it worth the effort? Okay, so I'll add some video to this so you guys can see what I went through to actually add the fenders. It's pretty straightforward, and I will admit the instructions for installing the metal cloak fenders are really good. With a good drill, a good set of drill bits and step bits and things like that, this is pretty easy to do. Now, I do have nutsert tools and things like that that make it even a little easier for me to do from when I was building hot rods and stuff like that. So it was even a little easier. And to me, I spent a whole weekend doing it, just the fenders. But let me explain why. When I took the fenders off, it wasn't just about doing the fenders at the time. It was also about running electrical at the same time. And so throughout the process of installing the fenders, I would have to run off and pick up electrical parts or things like that. And so it took me a little longer to install the fenders because I was doing other things at the same time. And as my wife will tell you, I'm incredibly anal about how this is set up, how it's bolted together, how it works. So I was incredibly meticulous in going through the process so that everything was done exactly perfect. Let's just hit the pros and cons of the fenders themselves. So first thing is better articulation than what I had before. As I mentioned before, I had some rubbage on the back. There was no rubbage in the front. But now I can actually remove more of the bump stops and get even better articulation than what I had with the stock fenders. So that's number one, right? Better articulation for sure. They're stronger than the stock fenders. As I pointed out, I had literally ripped one fender off here previously just based on a stick, you know, that we ran over, a tree branch that we ran over. And that's not going to happen with this, right? This is incredibly beefy and strong, and these are aluminum. Went with the aluminum fenders instead of steel to keep things lightweight, but they're still incredibly strong, right? Now, what about the cons? Tire coverage. Okay, so this is a big one for me because this was one of the things that made me procrastinate on putting the fenders on. As you can see here, at the front edge of the tire is sticking out pretty far from this front edge here. Now, as we get back here, it's about the same as it was for the stock tire, but as you come back down, back here, you'll see that it actually tapers in and exposes quite a bit of the tire. Now, what that means is that we're definitely going to have more mud and things slung up on the side of the Jeep. The back one isn't quite as different. You know, it's literally about the same as what the stock fender was here. And we had the Extreme Recon fenders, right, which give you an additional flare on there. So our Jeep stayed pretty clean in muddy conditions. I think we can pretty much kiss those days goodbye. So that's one of the cons to going with these fenders, is that you're just not going to get the coverage, and your Jeep is going to get a whole lot filthier on the sides and the mirrors and things like that. So, but again, we'll see how things go, whether or not it was was really worth the effort of putting those fenders on. By the way, if you guys are finding any of this useful or just fun to watch, I don't know, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. It helps out the channel, and we really appreciate it. So now, while I had the fenders off, it gave me time to actually run wiring for a couple of things. Let me show you what those are. First one was I had installed some Baja Design lights down here, and let's talk about these for a second, because these are not, you'd think these are just going to be attached to the reverse, right? So when I go into reverse, these light up. I did not do that, and here's why I did not do that. I don't want these to come on when I'm in a parking lot with a bunch of people around, where it just floods the whole area with light and blinds everybody in the parking lot. They're really intended for trail use. So when we're out on the trail and we're trying to back up in dark conditions and things like that and being able to see, we want better visibility, and that's really what these are for. Now, the Oracle lights that I installed do improve visibility some. They're definitely brighter than the stock, but nothing compared to the Baja Design light, the Squadrons that we installed here. So running electrical for that was one of the things, and that, you know, clearly it runs down through from the battery in the front all the way down through the frame and back here, and pops out up underneath right here where we make the connections. Another thing that I had to run electrical for was chase lights. When we're out in really dusty conditions or foggy conditions and somebody's following us, or somebody could just be out on that road too, and we're ripping down the road. I don't know if you've ever been behind somebody in those kind of conditions, but you can't see anything. And we've been in situations where people had chase lights in front of us, and you can definitely see where they're going, what they're doing, and you can see where you're going because of it. You know, you have some indication of, whoa, that's where they are. I can see where they are, how far ahead they are, things like that through the dust and fog. And I always felt horrible about the fact that we didn't have chase lights, because it just felt really selfish. We're out there, and so I typically would end up bringing up the rear as a tail gunner, because I just didn't want anybody behind me potentially running into the back of me because I'd slowed down. And so now we have our chase lights, so running the electrical for that also runs along through underneath the frame, up through the tail light, and up through the top. This is coming up from behind the light, and that's the one that's going to run up behind the actual interior up here, and we're going to go through the roof to power the chase lights. For the wiring of the actual chase lights, there's no question you do have to drill through the top, because you're going to be passing a cable up through the top. But this is a product from a company called Seaview, and these are actually made for marine use, for passing electrical wires through an area on a boat, basically, that is, you want to maintain waterproof capability. And what we'll be doing is we'll be passing our wiring up through this device on the roof of the Jeep, and coming out and connecting a Y that will allow us to connect both of these chase lights. And then the last thing we ran was something called a Charger 1, the electrical for a Charger 1. So let me show you how that goes. There was a grommet, and I'll show you, I'll put some stuff up, and that's now hidden behind the inner fender liner right back in here. And the wiring was run through the frame and comes up through the frame, and that pops out right up in here. And you can see where I came out right between the subwoofer area and where the carpeting ends. My wiring comes out through here through a protected sheath and connects to the actual circuit breaker here. So this circuit breaker is pretty cool. What I can do is I can literally turn this breaker off. In fact, you can probably see, you'll see every 4 seconds it blinks. 1, 2, right there. Now, what it's doing is it's sensing the battery, saying, oh, I only see 12 volts. So I'm not going to actually charge the AC 180 that sits up here on the shelf. Now, when I click this breaker off, that just disconnects power completely from the battery. And so now you'll see there's no light at all. That means there's nothing going to the actual charging system, right? The Bluity charging system. But what's really cool is I can just leave this on all the time, right? The thing about that now is that I never ever have to actually turn off my AC 180, and I never ever have to turn off the fridge in the back of my Jeep. So if I come in here and I look at what's going on, you'll see that right now I'm sitting at 75%. So It's no charging is going on right now, but my fridge is plugged in and running, right? And it's maintaining a certain temperature. So now I can just leave my fridge on indefinitely. The charger 1 comes in right into the charging port, and then my fridge comes out of the AC180, which again, it still sits up here on the shelf. And if I start the engine and it sees 14 volts, it will say, oh, look, the engine is clearly running. It will start to charge the AC180, and this will start to increase from 75 watts and continue to charge up. Now, so keynote. We can get quite a bit of use out of this when we're just charging the fridge. It can last for days. But we also charge things like GoPro battery, the drones and things like that. So we charge a lot of stuff with it. And so now that we have the Charger 1 wiring routed, that's all set. We also have solar panels, 200 watts of solar that we take with us in case we're going to be parked in one location for multiple days and not driving. And with the Charger 1, because it charges so much more rapidly than plugging it into a 12-volt source, that is, one, it charges up really fast when you start the engine. And you'll notice the connector it uses is the same as a solar connector. So if I want, I can easily disconnect the Charger 1 and actually go ahead and plug the solar panels in if I want to use them. Now, that's going to be really rare now with the solar panels. In fact, I would argue that unless we're camping more than about 3 days in one location, which by the way, for us never happens. I mean, even when we go to an expo, we're only there at the expo for maybe 2 nights, never really 3 nights that I can think of. I don't think we're really going to need to take the solar with us very often anymore. And so that's kind of nice. That's something that, again, another thing I don't have to pack. You'll notice that almost everything is Baja designs. LP6 is on the front bumper. We've got Squadron lights here in the rear bumper, and we've got Baja designs, S2 Sports up here for the chase lights. I've had really good experience with these. In fact, I'll be honest with you, the mounting of these with the bracket into the bottom of the tent, the cool part about this is that if I take the tent off and put the rack back on, these will go directly from this right to the tent, the roof rack, the C channel. Real easy to transition from one item on the roof to another. The other thing is, you'll notice this faceplate right here. You can remove this, flip it over, put it any orientation you want, and so depending on where you mount it, that allows you to keep things, you know, right side up, basically. Now, I've had quite a few people ask me, hey, are you running an S-Pod or something like that to control all of these lights and things that we've added to the Jeep? And the answer is no. Now, we bought a Rubicon, and one of the key things about the Rubicon is the auxiliary switches. And the auxiliary switches have a couple of connection points. One is right here under the hood. There's an area here where you can access all 4 of the actual connections. They run 2 are 1 amperage and 2 are another amperage. I'll put a note up here with regards to what amperage that actually is. And truth be told, I'm able to run all the lights I have today, which would be chase lights, bumper lights, LP6s, and what was number 4? I'm having a brain fart. I'll put it up here. But I'm actually running 4 things off of the auxiliary switches in the Jeep, and I do not need an S-Pod yet. Now, something else that I did that kind of made things a little bit easier, and I'm not here to really promote this really, but it's helping me out quite a bit, is you can see what I'm running here is the Wizard from Epic Adventure Outfitters. So they give you a block here, they give you more terminals for the hot side. There's a small block that you get over here for the negatives, and you can see I actually route my winch to that, and then the charging system for the Charger 1 is here as well. And then all of my grounds go to this block as well, which is provided, which connects to the ground block here. And instead of having just one lug to put all these things to, they give you multiple spots to be able to plug things onto, and it's just more room and allows you to keep things a little tidier under the hood instead of having a big rat's nest. Now, I've gone through clearly and labeled things, and you see the one thing I have here, these would be bumper lights. This one here is for chase lights. You can see this one is winch. This one is my charger one, or charging. Same thing here, the positive lead for the charging. This is for my LP6s, the two big fuses here that are coming off. And so I'm trying to keep things kind of neatly labeled and stuff like that. So that that little wizard, it's a few blocks of metal with some terminals that allow you to connect things to, which gives you a little more flexibility, so you're not trying to stick everything onto one big lug or something on the battery. One of the other things I was recently asked about was whether I was using a Tazer or not. And in the beginning, when we first got the Jeep, one of the first things we did was install a Tazer. So it allowed me to set my tire diameter and gear ratio so that the shift changes and things like that in the transmission were better set up for a 38-inch tire. And that was very helpful. So the Tazer helped us there. The other thing it helped me do was disable the auto start stop, which I hate. I hate the auto start stop. We actually ended up removing the Tazer at one point because, well, frankly, we were told that, hey, if you ever take your Jeep to the dealership and have service and they see a Tazer in there, they're going to void your warranty, right? And I don't know if that's really true. My dealership where I take the Jeep is actually really freaking cool, and we've never had any kind of a situation like that. Now, I ended up removing the Tazer and using an ODB programmer and doing all the programs and making them permanent myself some time ago. But recently, with some of the changes that we're going through now, I actually reinstalled the Tazer and disconnected fuse 42, I think it is, to just completely eliminate the auto start stop function. You basically remove that cable for the secondary battery. And the reason I did that is a couple of things. One is that secondary battery, I don't know if you guys have run into this at all, but I've heard enough horror stories about that going dead and becoming vampiric to the main battery and leaving people stranded in the middle of nowhere and no ability to actually recover, right? And that's no good. It's a real pain to jumpstart a Jeep when that auxiliary battery is connected. You can do your own research on that. There's a lot of videos out there that talk about it. And so I really wanted to get rid of the need for the secondary battery, which is really just there for the auto start stop function. I don't use the auto start stop at all. So that's one of the reasons we stuck the Tazer back in, and I'm now using the Tazer again. A couple of other reasons are I really don't like if you're four-wheeling your Jeep and JL, you're probably familiar with this, but sometimes you want to get out of the Jeep and walk up and check out the trail you're about to drive through or something, or you need to get out of the Jeep for some reason because you're in some really crazy terrain. So you get out while the Jeep is running in park with the e-brake on, and you shut the door, and what does it do? Honk, honk, honk 3 times, right? That drives me nuts, especially when you're out with a group of people and stuff like that and your Jeep keeps honking all the time. So that's something you can disable with the Tazer. And there's a few things you can do, like override the sway bar disconnect. Normally you can only disconnect the sway bar under certain conditions, in four-wheel drive under a certain speed and things like that. That's something you can override, and you can disconnect that sway bar whenever you want to a degree. And the other one was when you use your lockers. Now, I want to be clear. Lockers are interesting. When you're out crawling and stuff like that, lockers are really a last resort. You just rarely use lockers, especially on the front, because once you lock your front end, your steering is pretty much kaput. You can't turn corners very well at all, right? So you don't use lockers that often when you're crawling, but when you're snow wheeling, you want to use those lockers a lot in deep snow. And you want to be able to use them in 4 high, not just 4 low. So you want to be able to override the Jeep's limitations, let's put it that way, limitations that they put in place, and be able to do the things you want to do and use those things the way you want to use them. And so I ended up putting the Tazer back in so I could override some of those things. 12-volt socket in the back. I've got a little clip here that I want to show you guys. We used to plug our fridge in to this 12-volt DC outlet. Actually, we didn't plug the fridge in there. What we used to plug in there was our AC 180 to charge it. Now, it worked. It worked for us it's been going on a couple years now, but I found something out. it got to the point where I actually had to hold the thing just right to get any contact in there. So if you just plugged it in and let it go, it just wouldn't charge anymore. There was no contact happening. So I bought a new connector in here, and I just installed that new connector today. But there's something else interesting that I found. If you can look at this connector, you'll see that is scorched. We clearly may have been pulling too much current through that. That's very dangerous. So it's still functional. We'll go ahead and use that connector, but that clearly got very hot right there on that lead. And so just something to share with you guys. If you're plugging your AC 180 into the 12 volt DC outlet in the back, maybe not such a good idea. One more thing I want to touch on today, and that is the Patagonia tires. So I have been a fan of the Patagonia tire, and I don't know if I was lucky on my first set or just unlucky on my second set. My first set was great. It always balanced good. The reason I go with the tires because it's a lighter weight tire than the Nitto, and I'm trying to keep a weight down, especially with rotating mass like this. But something we're running into here is my left rear driver's side here and my right front passenger side. When they are road force balanced, it's very difficult to get them down to an acceptable level, right? What they call an acceptable level. In fact, I want to say one of them is something like 45 pounds of road force, and the other one is close to that as well. And that is a lot of road force on the road force balancers. You'd like it to be zero, right? Now, I've got a small little shimmy that I can feel. It basically feels like a tire out of balance, and I know that's what it's coming from. And I'm going to see what I can do to talk to the guys at the tire shop to see if I can either warranty those two, they're giving me the problem, or do something else. But if I can't remedy that problem on the Patagonia tires, I'm going to have to eat it, and I'm going to go with a different tire. Like I said, the first set was really good to me, but this second set is giving me a problem on 2 of the 5 tires, 5 including the spare. So I'll keep you guys posted on what I find out there, but I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Another thing I want to give you a heads up on is, you may remember I had switched to the Apex valves for fast air down. Now that fast air down is nice. Don't get me wrong, it's very nice, it's very fast. But I am experiencing a problem with the TPMS sensor on, currently it's the right rear. Now, when these were first installed, let me walk you through the nightmare that I had. I even went to the tire shop that installed the tires, and I showed them the valve stems that I was going to use switch to. And I asked them, are you comfortable installing these? Because if you're not, I'm okay with that. We'll just go with the standard valve. And they said, no, we've done them before, we can do it, we got it. And I said, okay, fine. They installed them. I went to pick the vehicle up. None of the TPMS sensors were working. And the guy told me, well, you need to drive it a while. And I'm familiar with that. Sometimes you need to drive it for a few minutes and then they'll actually register. And so I did that. About 24 hours went by, maybe 2 days, and I went back to the tire installer and said, look, they're not working at all. And he tried to convince me I had a problem with my computer, the EEC and the Jeep, which is crazy, right? They work before you install the tires and valves. They don't work after you did. Clearly it happened when you installed the tires and the valves. So I went to another tire shop, which is a person that I trust and know really, really well. And his name is Carlos. Shout out to Carlos. He's freaking amazing. And he got all the TPMS sensors working. Now, something has happened where one of the sensors on my passenger rear is doing something very strange. Well, frankly, the sensor itself just isn't even registering on this one. And something else that's weird with this one is that when I go to release the pressure in this particular valve, the gauge that I use to read the pressure as I'm airing down doesn't register any pressure at all while it's airing down, and I have to close the valve for it to register. That's never happened before, and it doesn't happen on any of my other tires. When you actually release the valve, you can watch the gauge move down all the way to the pressure and stop at the pressure you want. But on this particular tire, I can't do that, because as soon as I release the pressure, it sees nothing. And so I have to keep closing it, look at the pressure, open it, close it, look at the pressure, open it, until it gets down to the pressure I want it at. And that's a little frustrating. So there's something going on with that valve, that apex valve, and that TPMS sensor. All right, so that's pretty much the update this week, guys. Sorry I didn't take you on an adventure this week. We're hoping to get back out there again soon. And we do have a couple more things that we're gonna upgrade here. They would be the shocks and the suspension. So stay tuned for that. You guys know I'm using Metal Cloak and I don't want to give it away, but we're going to make some changes there. Some of you that follow the channel probably have a pretty good idea. And once that's done, we will do that full walk around of the Jeep and show you guys what stood the test of time for the modifications we made from the first time, which things didn't, which things we've modified again. And hopefully we're getting close to the end here. Because frankly, I'd rather go do adventures than work on the Jeep. But I hope to see you guys next time. And don't forget to like and subscribe.